how does everyone else get it and America doesn't? Honestly, and this might come as a bit sharp, but it's true, because America and the people of the USA have been taught wrong things for a very, very long time. America has been taught that it is the only country that has freedom. It is the only country that has independence, and it has grown into a completely individualistic and nationalistic mindset that has eliminated anything else outside of the borders of the USA and become so individualistic, in fact, that it has eliminated so many other people within the USA. It has become so about me, it's so about myself, it's not about anybody else. And that's not the way that any functional society can possibly work within itself or interact with the rest of the world. But as I say, the freedom thing is also a complete myth. There are freedoms in a lot of countries, and America is not unique and special in this regard. But unfortunately, the people of the USA have been told that they are continuously, and they feel like everything is encroaching on these freedoms when actually it's just 90% of the time governors or lawmakers trying to make a society functional by realizing that the only way a society can function is in unison with itself. Freedom exists in other places, and a lot of Americans will get annoyed at that point, but I'm afraid it's true, because you see, freedom is completely subjective. In America, there is the freedom to choose who gets healthcare, because it's up to me if I pay for healthcare for myself and my family. Whereas in my country, we all get healthcare, and so I have the freedom to be ill regardless of what my financial position currently is. In America, you have the freedom and the right to bear arms, but you see, I have the freedom to walk down the street and not worry about the fact that I might get shot, or that somebody who I care about might get shot, or if I have children, sending them to school wondering if they're going to get shot. See, we have the freedom to not be anxious about those kinds of things. Freedom is subjective, and I think that is something that has been completely lost on America. A lot of the things that America recognizes as freedoms are actually just hyper individualistic notions. Just because you can do something as an individual doesn't mean that you should, in a functional society, be able to do whatever you want as an individual. That's a myth. And that is one of the biggest problems that has led to where America has ended up. This idea that freedom means I can do whatever the hell I want is ridiculous. And this idea that nowhere else in the world experiences freedom, I'm afraid, is completely wrong. Many places in the world experience freedom. Women in my country are free to get the healthcare that they need during pregnancy or after it without any kind of discrimination. As a matter of fact, bills have just been passed to make picket lining abortion clinics illegal. So they have the freedom to choose for their own reproductive health what they choose and not be bothered by it. Freedom is subjective. And I think a lot of the problem here is that there are people who have been indoctrinated so deeply into the propaganda within the USA that they genuinely believe that the USA is unique. And I think it comes as a blow to any American citizen who hears something like this to realize that actually that's not true. It really isn't true. The rest of the world, or at least a lot of the rest of the world, also have freedoms. Of course, there are countries that do not have freedoms, and I'm not saying that America is the worst country in the world, far from it. But this idea that America is unique and special in so many ways is completely false. America is not completely special and unique in millions of different ways. There are lots of countries that are a lot better than America in a lot of different ways. Employment is better elsewhere, wages are better elsewhere, pensions are better elsewhere, healthcare is better elsewhere, education systems are better elsewhere. There is a lot of things that are better elsewhere than they are in America. But unfortunately, for an incredibly long amount of time, this idea of freedom and this idea of individualism and this idea of America before anywhere else has grown and grown and grown to the point that your own neighbours are now completely and utterly disconnected from you, and you kind of exist, or a lot of people exist specifically within the right wing of America, in their own bubble, that they think that whatever they do, it's just about them. It doesn't impact anybody else, and if it does, they don't care. unfortunately, that is a road to disaster, and it's also, of course, brewed into, especially the propaganda of Donald Trump, that any idea of society as a functional society that co-depends and co-functions within itself has to be communism. Again, a complete and utter lie. Ask any conservative Republican to define communism, and they struggle deeply to do it. Communism is not this idea that society functions and helps itself and helps each other and works like a well-oiled machine that is codependent. That's not what communism is. But that is what Donald Trump and his ilk have taught America communism is. And as a result of that, any idea that isn't completely individualistic or nationalistic, that is just completely and utterly focused on oneself, anything that is not that is considered communist. And that is completely ridiculous. And these are the things that, from an outsider's perspective, we look onto and we just go, oh, Jesus, like, good God, what are you doing? Because such nonsense is spread throughout the propaganda of America. You know, we've got more freedoms in terms of the fact that we know that the news channels that we watch are not as heavily skewed and as heavily biased as your news channels. Your news channels are not even, they're more like opinion pieces than news, you know? Like, there's a lot of behind the scenes manipulation from both sides of the political spectrum in America that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere else. Your political system is also troubling. You know, this idea to vote for one specific individual, we don't do that. We vote for a party, and then that party elects a leader, and if that leader doesn't fulfill their position properly, then they can be voted out by their party. That's simplifying it a lot, but that's the case. That's how Boris Johnson was gotten rid of. That's how we had, within one Conservative term, so to speak, for the last 15 years before Labour just took over, how we had so many different prime ministers, because it's the party that is elected, not the individual. There's just a lot of problems, but I think it all comes down to this idea of individualism, this idea of freedom, which is a complete and utter myth, which might come as a blow to so many people, and I don't mean it in an offensive way, but it's true. It's nonsense. It's nonsense that America has more freedom than other places in the West and other developed countries. It's just not true. And I think that these things, coupled in with a terrible education system, coupled in with heavily propagandized news reporting, and strength and almost narcissism of a nation that thinks that kind of someone who is big and bolstery and strong, like Trump, is the best political candidate, and there's just so much going on at once that's just led to this absolutely bleak place where a government has been completely upturned and an opportunity to have educated individuals running the government, not people who present Fox News or a billionaire who throws his toys out of the pram every second, who has decimated one of the world's most popular social media channels, for example. Like, it's just ended up in this almost completely draconian state where education and history and culture and intellect and academia don't matter, and what matters is who can be the biggest knobhead in the case of Trump. You know, it's all just a bit of a mess. But I hope that maybe gives some context as to why we can see it and America can't.